This is the stalker lady story. She relentlessly pursued the crown prince. Her obsessive stalking behavior became extreme. The prince finally executed the woman.
A reader reflects on the villainess's best.
A massive explosion suddenly erupts. Flames consume the entire ring. A maid urges the girl to wake up as she realizes she is surrounded by servants.
The brown-haired maid checks on the silver-haired woman, asking if she is all right after the terrible accident.
The maid explains that the kitchen oven exploded while the purple-eyed girl stares in realization. She looks around the kitchen in confusion, wondering where she is. The girl realizes she has possessed the villainous Saravi de Praneus, who is destined to be killed by Crown Prince Raven. The maids finish bathing the young lady, declaring that the process is finally over. Saravi worries about her fate of dying at a young age.
As she sits on the bed in a white robe, a maid approaches her with crumbing.
The maid notes that Saravi was previously too busy stalking the prince to change, while the lady recognizes her character's dresses. The maid offers a selection of new dresses, but Saravi tries to stop her. The pink-haired maid excitedly presents two revealing, sexy outfits. The maid asks her to choose a favorite, which clearly distresses Saravi. A voice questions if she is certain. The palace balcony stands bathed in light. The maid mentions that Saravi's old clothes are unwearable and notes how she used to refuse these specific outfits. Chibi Saravi peeks from behind a curtain and orders the maid to throw all the old dresses away. The maid is stunned by the request. She stares at the dress in her hands in disbelief. A joyful smile lights up the maid's face. Saravi peeks out again to ask for one more specific item. Knights in the corridor complain that all the prepared meals were ruined. They wonder if there has been another stalking incident or if they must skip lunch. The soldiers look on in complete shock. Saravi walks confidently past them wearing a sharp military-style uniform. The men are speechless as they watch the lady pass by. The sun shines over the palace.
Saravi arrives at Crown Prince Raven's office, remembering she is destined to die by his hand in 3 years.
She asks her maid Emily for her age, causing the maid to wonder if she is suffering from a head injury. Emily tearfully reminds her that she just turned 15 and was previously very happy about it. Saravi realizes her time limit to avoid being killed is exactly 3 years. Raven sits at his desk while a subordinate reports that Saravi collapsed after an oven exploded while she was cooking. The soldier confirms there were no other injuries besides the young lady. The white-haired prince listens to the report with a cold stare. The soldier waits for his commander's response. Raven's intense golden eyes narrow as he thinks. Raven tells the vice commander that he should be getting used to the name Destian by now. The prince remains at his desk while the soldier stands ready. Raven warns the man to avoid meeting or getting involved with Saravi at all costs. The soldier acknowledges the order to stay away. Raven explains that the woman radiates a bizarre and unsettling aura from her entire being. He recalls a disturbing moment where she offered him a nonsensical cake, noting that the memory alone gives him goosebumps. Raven admits that simply having that woman in his sight is tiresome. He repeats his order to avoid her as a knock sounds at the office door. In a small office, the white-haired Crown Prince Raven looks down at his paperwork while his dark-haired vice commander stands nearby, listening as the prince notes that things are unfortunate for his subordinate. A heavy creak sounds as Saravi pushes open the grand, ornate doors to the office, responding to a command to come inside. Standing before the desk, the silver-haired woman is met with silence as she prepares to face the prince, while a narrative voice notes that the vice commander is not one to complain. Raven gestures toward her with an intense and expectant look in his golden eyes. The vice commander breaks out into a nervous sweat as the narrative begins to describe his current situation. Dressed in a sharp blue military-style uniform, Saravi stands gracefully amidst a backdrop of flowers, stating that she has come to offer her greetings to His Highness. Raven stares at her in complete and utter bewilderment. The vice commander is equally frozen in shock by the young lady's sudden change in appearance and demeanor. A gentle smile plays on Saravi's lips as she maintains her poised and respectful stance. The atmosphere becomes incredibly tense as Raven stares at her with a look of pure confusion, asking what is going on. Radiating a cheerful aura, Saravi announces to the stunned men that dinner is finally ready. Narrative text explains that while the food looks elegant, the palace actually lacks any properly trained cooks. A group of hulking, muscular soldiers stand uncomfortably in frilly maid aprons, highlighting that all of the men are specialized strictly for combat rather than domestic duties. A loud crack sounds as a soldier accidentally chops right through the wooden table, prompting someone to scream at him to avoid destroying the equipment while they try to prepare a meal. Chaos erupts in the kitchen as another soldier is scolded for cracking an egg directly onto his comrade's bald head instead of into a bowl. A massive blast of heat fills the room as a soldier mistakenly uses a flamethrower as a gas burner, resulting in a plate of completely charred and unidentifiable black sludge.
In a flashback, a pink-haired maid watches in awe as Saravi expertly chops vegetables, praising the young lady for her hidden culinary skills. Saravi focused on the task at hand, dumping ingredients into a large pot while worrying that she would be in deep trouble if she failed to provide an edible meal. She carefully tastes a spoonful of the broth. A hum of satisfaction escapes her as she reflects on how cooking has always been her primary hobby and special skill. Stirring the large pot, she hopes that by providing a delicious meal, she might finally be able to redeem her terrible reputation in the eyes of the crown prince. Back in the present, a heavy clatter sounds as Raven strikes the plate of food, sending the dark red stew spilling across the pristine white tablecloth. Raven gestures angrily at the mess, accusing Saravi of using even more underhanded and suspicious methods than before. Gritting his teeth, the prince glares at her and calls her foolish for daring to try and force him to eat her vulgar cooking once again. Saravi is taken aback by his harsh reaction, confused by his mention of her having cooked for him in the past. Raven remains deeply suspicious, demanding to know exactly what kind of scheme she is plotting this time. The trio stands in a tense standoff around the ruined table as the spilled food continues to stain the cloth. Saravi looks down at the mess on the table and begins to reach out her hand. To everyone's absolute horror, Saravi picks up a piece of the spilled food and eats it with a quick chomp, causing Raven to cry out in shock. The men watch in stunned silence as the young lady calmly chews the food she just retrieved from the dirty tablecloth. She finishes her bite, maintaining a calm and unbothered expression. Saravi looks directly at the prince, her expression unreadable as she stands her ground. Raven is left speechless, a bead of sweat rolling down his face as he tries to process her bizarre behavior. A sudden rattle sounds as the prince stands up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He turns his back on her and begins to walk away, declaring firmly that he will not be fooled by her antics. A heavy slam echoes as the door closes, leaving Saravi standing alone with a somber expression. The vice commander remains behind, looking toward the young lady as she stands by the messy table. Saravi remains silent, seemingly lost in her own box. Curious, the vice commander decides to take a bite of the food for himself, his expression shifting as he tastes it. He continues to eat the meal she prepared, finding it surprisingly palatable, despite the prince's rejection. Later, Saravi sits quietly in the back of a moving carriage, gazing out the window as time passes in a blur. Her pink-haired maid, Emily, leans in to announce that they have finally arrived back at the family mansion. Saravi steps into the building, looking around in surprise at the grand interior. She lets out a soft gasp of wonder as she steps onto a balcony, taking in the beautiful architecture. As she walks through the halls, she reflects on how magnificent the building is, noting that it is exactly what one would expect from the Empire's most powerful household. Upon entering her quarters, she finds the room far too flashy for her taste, while Emily offers to go and prepare a warm bath for her. Saravi sits down on the edge of the large bed, thinking to herself that the environment feels a bit uncomfortable and overwhelming. Her attention is caught by something hidden, and she lets out a curious sound as she notices an object tucked away. She crouches down and reaches under the bed, wondering what could be hidden there. Her eyes widen in realization as she pulls out a small, mysterious container, wondering if she has just discovered a hidden jewelry box. A light click sounds as the silver-haired lady carefully pries open the small, ornate wooden chest. Saravi peers inside the box with a look of utter confusion and disbelief. Her pink-haired maid, Emily, watches her with a cheerful and expectant expression. As Saravi crouches on the floor with the open container, Emily approaches and wonders aloud what the young lady has found. The maid's eyes widen in realization as she sees the contents of the box. Saravi gestures toward a lock of pink hair inside the chest and asks Emily if she knows what it is, noting that her own memories are still quite hazy. Emily explains that it is the hair of a noble lady whom Saravi used to despise, causing the young lady to let out a confused sound. Saravi wonders why she would have ever hated someone enough to keep their hair, noting that this specific detail was never mentioned in the original novel. A wave of distress washes over Saravi as Emily explains that the hatred stemmed from the woman attempting to seduce the crown prince. A realization strikes Saravi as she peers back into the box, finally understanding why Raven acted so shocked by her previous behavior. Saravi whips her head around and demands to know exactly what the maid just said. Horror fills Saravi as she begins to realize that the person Emily is describing as a villainous stalker is actually herself. Emily continues, noting that the woman's infamy was so great that everyone in the entire kingdom knew of her. The maid describes how the woman secretly slipped an aphrodisiac into the prince's food and snuck into his bedroom, reminding Saravi how furious she had been at the time. Saravi's face pales as she asks for clarification on whether it was truly Saravi who had committed such bold and scandalous acts. Emily recounts the shocking story of how that lady, out of spite for being rejected, drank poison and ended her own life right in front of the prince, noting that the woman's level of obsession was on a different scale. Narrative text clarifies that while the original Saravi had stalker tendencies, she was never the type to use drugs or attempt public suicide.
Saravi realizes with growing dread that the content of the world she is in has fundamentally changed from the story she once read.
Sunlight streams onto an empty palace balcony, signaling a shift in the atmosphere. Inside the office, the dark-haired vice commander stands before the prince's desk, met only with a heavy silence. Raven looks down at his paperwork and coldly tells his subordinate to let Saravi do whatever she wants. The vice commander attempts to clarify the conditions of this arrangement, noting that there is an exchange involved. Bright light filters through the lush green leaves of a tree. Back in the kitchen, Saravi focuses on a bubbling pot of stew, thinking to herself that the direction of the story might truly be changing now. She grips a large spoon with determination, hoping that she can successfully avert her destined death if she does her absolute best. Emily stands by with the tray, watching as her lady continues to work diligently over the stove.
Saravi offers a spoonful of the broth to her maid, tearfully asking if she would like to have a taste. Emily is delighted by the delicious flavor, singing out her praise and hoping that the crown prince will enjoy it just as much.
A soft hum of satisfaction escapes Saravi as she continues her culinary work with a gentle smile. Formal text announces that Saravi has officially been granted permission to be in charge of the palace meals. Later, the vice commander meets Saravi in the hallway to deliver a report. Saravi listens intently, her expression turning somber as she considers the new information. The soldier informs her that despite her efforts, His Highness has declared that he will not eat a single thing. Stunned, Saravi wonders if the prince is actually planning to go on a fast. Narrative text notes that the relationship between the two is hopelessly tangled due to her past stalker antics. Standing in a large, empty room with the prince's back turned to her, Saravi realizes that a simple apology will never be enough to reach him. She thinks to herself that she must do something with enough impact to show how truly desperate she is to change. The vice commander looks at Saravi as she finishes her thought, acknowledging the difficult situation. Saravi stands tall, her gaze fixed on the distance as she prepares herself for what comes next. The soldier lets out a confused sound, surprised by the lady's sudden shift in energy. With a determined aura, Saravi declares that she simply cannot stand by and watch His Highness suffer any longer. A wave of exhaustion hits her, and she worries that she might starve to death herself before the prince ever takes a bite. Narrative text questions how she can possibly keep moving around in her current state without any food. From the shadows, Saravi watches Raven as he intensely practices his swordsmanship in the courtyard. Her head begins to throb with pain, and she decides she needs to find somewhere quiet to rest immediately. Her vision blurs as a sudden, sharp ringing sounds in her ears. A pained cry escapes her as she loses her balance and begins to collapse toward the ground. A firm, strong grab sounds as someone catches her before she can hit the floor. Saravi finds herself leaning against Raven's chest as he holds her steady, offering a weak word of thanks while the prince stares down at her in complete shock. Saravi's cheeks flush as she gazes up. The prince's eyes widen as he lets out a confused sound. Saravi looks away with a troubled expression. A sharp throbbing sounds as Saravi apologizes, explaining she has a headache and is feeling dizzy. The prince's jaw tightens in frustration. A firm grab sounds as he holds her. A wobbly stumble sounds as Saravi groans while the prince holds her steady. The prince's gaze is hidden as he coldly calls her a murderer. Saravi is stunned, wondering if she is actually a murderer as a heavy thud sounds. Narrative text notes there is more for her to learn. Raven questions why she is using such a tone and when she began wearing those clothes. Saravi tells herself to stay calm and focus on the present while ignoring the confusion for now. The prince demands she stop her performance and behave like a normal person. Saravi offers a sincere apology for everything that has occurred so far. Raven is left completely speechless, asking for clarification in shock. Raven maintains his firm grip on Saravi. Raven questions her honesty, noting she must already be feeling the consequences of her actions. Saravi promises she has kept her distance and will continue to do so, asking him not to worry. The prince remains silent while staring intensely at her. Saravi offers a small, tired smile and asks if he would like a meal. A soft slide sounds as Raven lets go, and Saravi feels her efforts are useless. A weary sigh sounds as she looks down. Raven warns her she will eventually fall ill, but a sudden call sounds to interrupt the moment. A sudden slip sounds as she falls. A firm catch sounds as Saravi collapses against the prince's chest. Narrative text transitions to the scene that follows. Raven sits on a throne preparing to eat. Raven takes a bite of the vegetable steer. Raven's eyes widen in absolute shock after tasting it. A soft cough sounds as Saravi notes the meal is edible and thanks the prince for eating. Saravi sits on a sofa sipping tea. Saravi reflects on being called a murderer, wondering who she could have killed.
Saravi asks Emily if she has committed a crime, surprising her Meg.
A crackle sounds as Saravi asks if she specifically killed someone. A cheerful giggle sounds as Emily laughs and dismisses the idea as impossible.
The maid offers to explain the truth since Saravi seems to have forgotten.
Emily recalls how Saravi would cry over bugs and force the maid to release them.
A tired sigh sounds as Emily notes how difficult that task was, while Saravi listens in confusion.
Emily begins to explain what she truly believes about her lady. The maid states with conviction that her lady could never be a person who hurts anyone.
Saravi offers a kind word of thanks, and Emily humbly downplays her role.
In the market, Saravi decides to look around while Emily prepares to gather ingredients.
A busy chatter sounds as Saravi walks.
A dark-haired noble mocks a young boy, telling him commoners are destined to be worker ants. The nobleman smirks while belittling the social status of common people. The noble dangles a toy, calling it a dust cloth and suggesting burning it while the boy begs for it back. Footsteps tap as Saravi orders the man to stop and the noble asks who she is. Saravi stares him down and tells him to give the toy back to the boy. A mocking snort sounds as the noble asks if the child actually needs the toy. A light toss sounds as the man drops the toy in the dirt and tells the boy to pick it up. Quick footsteps tap as Saravi confronts the nobleman in the street. A firm grab sounds as the young lady catches the noble's cloak. A hood slides back as the noble calls her cheeky and demands to know her identity. The crowd notices her silver hair and purple eyes with curiosity. A sharp realization sounds as the nobleman begins to recognize her. He's paralyzed with shock upon realizing she is Duchess Perneus. Saravi demands he apologize to the child and return the toy immediately. The noble wonders why a fellow aristocrat would intervene for a commoner. Saravi maintains a stern and unyielding gaze. The man prepares to leave while the commoners watch the spectacle. His face reddens as he fumes over being disgraced by the young lady. A firm grab sounds as the noble retrieves the stuffed toy. He tosses the toy back, telling the boy to be more careful. Saravi invites him to the Perneus estate if he has any grievances. Laughter erupts as the humiliated man hurriedly flees the scene. Sparkles shine as the young boy looks up at her in awe. She tells the boy he can visit her home if he is bullied again. Distant chatter sounds while soldiers observe the scene from afar. The knight in the visor stares intently at the lady. Busy chatter sounds as Saravi notices the soldiers preparing in the square. Footsteps tap as Saravi asks Demian if something has happened. Demian explains he is leaving to exterminate a troublesome race in the north.
Saravi is startled to hear they are leaving so soon.
The dark-haired soldier looks at her with a calm expression. She offers to prepare food, making Demian realize she was worried for him. Steady footsteps tap as Uncle Bart approaches and asks if Saravi is joining. Bart notes the wild environment and asks who will cook if she stays. A gentle patting sounds as Bart suggests her presence would be a great help. The soldier considers the trip length, noting the prince is also coming. Bart asks the helmeted soldier for the estimated duration of the trip. A smooth slide sounds as the knight removes his helmet. The blonde-haired crown prince, Raven, is revealed beneath the visor. Saravi is stunned by the prince's sudden appearance and participation. Bart informs the lady that the march will take about a week. Saravi plans to learn magic to keep the travel food fresh. Bart warns her that magical ingredients are quite expensive. Narration mentions a thing she never thought she would encounter. Saravi is overcome with horror and total disbelief. Heavy panting sounds as the lady struggles through the dense forest. Marching footsteps tap as she wonders how the soldiers remain so energetic. Marching footsteps tap as she questions if the men are even human. Saravi asks Demian why they cannot simply teleport to their destination. Demian explains that teleportation is impossible in forests with unstable magical energy. The soldier asks if she can continue, and she insists she is fine. Sharp slicing sounds as Saravi fends off aggressive vines with a dagger. Demian notes to the prince that the lady is pushing herself too much. The soldier asks if they should really leave her to struggle alone. Raven remains silent with a cold and focused expression. A sharp realization sounds as the prince silences his subordinate. A cold turn sounds as Raven orders them to focus only on the march. Raven looks back over his shoulder with a lingering gaze. Saravi kneels on the forest floor, appearing exhausted and worn down by the trek. The prince watches from a distance as the young lady struggles to keep up with the group.
Saravi resolves to handle the challenge herself, determined to act like a responsible adult.
With a determined expression, the silver-haired lady psychs herself up for the journey ahead. A startled sound escapes her as a stray vine suddenly ensnares her leg. Saravi stares down in confusion and surprise as she is caught by the vegetation. A pained groan sounds as she is struck by a sudden, sharp sensation. Saravi winces while clutching her shoulder in agony, feeling a strange new pain. A sharp slicing sound echoes as the aggressive vines tighten their grip. The soldiers and the prince continue their march ahead, leaving the lady behind. A terrified scream rings out as Saravi is abruptly pulled away into the depths of the forest. She cries out desperately for help as she is dragged further into the foliage. A blindingly bright light suddenly fills the entire scene.
Heavy gasps sound as Saravi finds herself lying in a mysterious clearing, wondering where she has been taken. A young boy with silver hair and pointed ears stares at her with a single intense blue eye.
The elf boy stands silently among the white flowers, wearing a green cloak with gold embroidery.
Saravi asks the child for his identity as she tries to regain her composure. The small elf approaches her with a look of quiet curiosity. Saravi looks up at the boy in complete bewilderment. The child notes that while he can hear the thoughts of others, he hears nothing from her. Saravi realizes he possesses the power of telepathy, and he matter-of-factly confirms her suspicion. At the campsite, soldiers discuss their plans for the night and mention the missing scouting party.
A heavy silence follows as Demian sits on a log, focused on a map in his hands.
Raven walks into the camp and immediately questions the whereabouts of the lady.
The prince's expression hardens as he realizes she is nowhere to be found.
A busy chatter sounds as the prince moves through the camp with a sense of growing urgency. Raven orders Demian to keep the secret and declares his intention to search for the lady himself.
The elf boy tells Saravi that he understands the reason for the humans' arrival. He asks if their true objective is to slaughter his people, his eyes flashing with a dark energy. Saravi is left speechless and horrified by the child's accusation. She asks if he belongs to the race reported to have been kidnapping people. The boy indignantly denies the claim, insisting that elves would never commit such crimes. Saravi assures him that the crown prince is a just man who would never hurt the innocent. The child questions her honesty, noting that he can sense many human weapons nearby. Saravi explains that they only came to investigate reports of harm being done in the area. She offers a sincere vow that she has no intention of harming him. The boy notes that she is telling the truth and is incapable of lying to him. A soft smile touches the elf boy's face as he begins to trust her. Saravi is confused when the child mentions a specific smell. He explains that liars give off a distinct scent, while she smells of trumph. A series of heavy thuds sound as an ominous and dark presence approaches the clearing. The boy urgently tells Saravi to hide as he senses immediate danger. Menacing, horned beings with purple skin emerge, gloating about the scent of humans. The elf boy uses his magic to demand that the intruders leave his territory immediately. The horned woman mocks their resistance with a cruel and condescending laugh. She stares directly at Saravi, announcing that she has finally found her target. Saravi realizes with horror that these are the dangerous heteromorphic beings they were warned about. She pulls the young elf close to her, attempting to protect him from the looming threat. A swift movement sounds as the monsters lunge forward to attack the pair. A sharp slicing sound echoes as the aggressive monsters are suddenly struck down. Saravi calls out in relief as the crown prince suddenly appears before her. Raven stands protectively between the lady and the dangerous intruders. The prince's eyes burn with an intense, focused golden light. A swift, powerful sword strike cuts for the air. The horned beings fall to the ground, defeated by the prince's intervention. Saravi calls out to him again as the threat is neutralized. Raven looks back at her and demands to know why she is there.
He suspects the young elf boy is the one who brought her to the clearing. Saravi quickly explains that she was actually dragged there by aggressive tree vines. The boy whispers that Raven's mind is too noisy, but Saravi defends him as a good person. Saravi pulls the small elf into a protective and gentle embrace. The young boy stays close to her, feeling safe in her arms. Raven looks away with an annoyed expression, stating his displeasure with the situation. The prince decides they should leave the clearing and regroup with the army. A sharp cry of pain escapes Saravi as she suddenly winces. Raven immediately stops and asks the lady if she is hurt. He notes that her shoulder is visibly swollen and asks what happened. Saravi thinks to herself that he is actually the one responsible for the injury. She lies and insists the demi-humans didn't do it, but Raven suspects the child. Raven lifts the elf boy by his collar to investigate his involvement. The child demands to be released, introducing himself as Zephyr and insisting he is not a thing. Raven ignores the boy's protest and demands that Saravi tell him the truth. She claims she was injured while exercising, but the prince immediately calls out her lie. He reminds her that she usually spends her time napping rather than being active. Saravi worries that being honest will make their relationship even more awkward. Raven waits for her answer with a stern and unyielding expression. The prince uses an authoritative tone to command the lady to tell him the truth. Saravi is startled by the overwhelming pressure of his sudden command. She admits that his rough handling earlier at the estate caused the injury. Raven is struck silent, looking genuinely shocked and guilty after hearing her confession. Saravi realizes he used dragon speech to force her honesty and finds it unfair. The prince lowers his gaze and offers a quiet, sincere apology. Saravi is left stunned by the unexpected and humble apology from the prince.
Raven insists that a shoulder injury is serious and shouldn't be ignored. She tries to downplay it, saying a doctor or priest can easily heal it later.
Raven remains quiet, seemingly processing the guilt of having hurt her.
Saravi offers a soft smile and thanks the prince for his concern.
Zephyr watches the exchange between the two humans with quiet curiosity.
Raven continues to hold the elf boy as they prepare to move. A tense silence falls as the prince and the boy glare at each other.
Zephyr breaks away and runs back to Saravi, shouting her name happily.
The boy clings to Saravi and mocks the prince, who admits he really dislikes the child. Saravi is surprised when the child mentions that his race possesses healing abilities.
Zephyr offers to heal her shoulder since it looks like it's causing her pain.
Raven yells for the boy to stay away and not touch her.
Zephyr retorts that he is only trying to fix the injury that the prince himself caused. He tells Saravi to be patient as the magic might feel slightly ticklish.
A brilliant blue light shines as Zephyr begins to mend the lady's injured shoulder.
Raven and Saravi share a look of surprise at the power of the child's magic.
Light glows on her injured shoulder.
Zephyr looks disappointed and notes that his healing magic should have reached her.
Saravi tells him not to worry because she is resistant to magic, while privately questioning why elven magic is failing.
Raven orders Saravi to leave the boy alone as they are heading back soon. A sudden "ha" sounds as Zephyr leaps out to block the prince's path. Raven asks why he is doing this, and Zephyr replies there is something they both need to know. The boy reveals that he is actually the chief of the demi-humans in this forest. Saravi repeats the word chief in complete disbelief as the prince looks on with surprise.
Zephyr laments that no one listens to what he says anymore.
The child explains that the reason the demi-humans are running wild is a serious issue. Zephyr claims that the reason they came into the forest is all because of this specific problem. Saravi faces the small elf boy. Raven stands guard beside the lady. The word no hangs in air. Raven explains that they don't interfere in other races' affairs or trespass, as it is an unspoken rule. The prince shouts Saravi's name and asks the boy how he completes the ceremony. Zephyr explains that he needs the elf god's acknowledgement to become an adult, but the god refuses him. Saravi asks why that is, while Raven lets out a tired sigh behind her.
The boy looks away and says he thinks it is because he is an incomplete elf.
Zephyr admits he is half elf and half another race, and that people call him a mongrel. The elf boy perks up and declares that there is one method left. Shimmering light surrounds Mered's talk. A tight squeeze sounds as the boy suddenly seizes Saravi's hands. Raven looks on with folded arms and a very annoyed expression.
Zephyr looks up with wide eyes and begs Saravi to marry him.
Zephyr clings to the flustered lady. Zephyr explains that if he doesn't become an adult, the forest will stay dangerous and people will keep getting hurt. Saravi calls to the prince, but Raven firmly states that he won't allow it. The lady gently strokes the boy's hair while Raven watches them with a dark look. Raven asks if she is really planning to marry him just because she feels sorry for him. Zephyr points at the prince and takes offense at being called a child. A tight squeeze sounds as the boy hugs Saravi's waist and hides his face. Raven's eyes glow with golden fire. Raven grabs the boy's green cloak. A sharp tug sounds as Raven lifts the boy into the air. The prince orders him to answer before he is forced to do so, asking again how old he is. Zephyr sheepishly reveals he is 227, leaving Saravi shocked. The boy struggles and explains that by elf standards, he is a child, so they shouldn't get the wrong idea.
Zephyr begs Saravi not to hate him and insists he didn't mean to deceive her.
A heavy thump sounds as Raven drops the boy unceremoniously onto the grass. Raven smirks and mockingly refers to the elf as a 227-year-old geezer. A sharp crackle sounds as the boy screams at the prince not to call him a geezer. Saravi holds up her hands in a pacifying gesture to stop the two from bickering. The lady reminds them that they are here to subdue the rampaging demi-humans. Raven suggests that there might be a peaceful way to resolve the situation without shedding blood. Saravi looks at the Esploth. Raven suggests they go meet the elf god first to see if they can persuade him. A heavy sigh sounds as the prince closes his eyes in frustration. Raven stands with a resolute expression. The prince stares down at the boy with a look of cold indifference. A sharp metallic sliding sounds as Raven threatens to burn the entire forest to the ground. Zephyr senses that the prince harbors complicated and intense feelings toward the lady. The boy wishes that the stern prince could be more honest about his heart. A series of quick footsteps sound as the boy leads them toward his home.
They arrive at a breathtaking elven village nestled deep within the massive trees.
Saravi looks around in confusion, wondering why all the villagers are hiding from them. The group continues through the silent settlement as the lady feels the weight of many eyes. Raven walks closely behind the lady, his expression hard and watchful. Saravi looks down with a pained expression as she senses the atmosphere of the village. Raven recounts the grim history of how humans once massacred demi-humans in these lands. The roar of a massive fire sounds as memories of burning elven homes fill the air. The scene depicts the tragic turning point where a legitimate conflict became a slaughter. He explains that the war eventually devolved into humans hunting demi-humans indiscriminately for sport. Soldiers are shown laughing as they treat the life and death hunt as mere entertainment. Captured elves are shown in chains, sold into slavery, and paraded around as trophies. Saravi is left speechless and horrified by the depths of human cruelty in the past. The prince looks away, his jaw set as he remembers the darker side of his world. He notes with bitterness that wealthy nobles still continue these horrific trades in secret. Saravi realizes that this injustice is the true source of the prince's hatred for the nobility. She watches Raven with a new perspective, understanding the burden of the knowledge he carries. Zephyr approaches a doorway where several villagers are peering out with great caution. Saravi offers a warm greeting to the hiding elves in an attempt to befriend them. A young elven child peeks timidly from behind the safety of a large tree. A sudden thud sounds as Zephyr jumps in front of the group to introduce his guest. Saravi feels a bit overwhelmed when she suddenly becomes the focus of everyone's curiosity. Distant, soft footsteps sound as an elder elf watches the group with a measuring gaze. The lady gently takes the boy's hand as they walk through the center of the village. An elven child looks up at her and asks in wonder if she is really a human. Saravi reassures the little one that there is absolutely nothing to be afraid of. She kneels down to the child's level, showing a kindness that surprises the watching elves. The young girl begins to relax as she senses the lady's genuine and gentle nature. Saravi admires the girl's long hair and asks if she can try braiding it. The lady offers the children some cookies, but they have never heard of such a treat. She opens a box to reveal a variety of delicious-looking sweets. The children eat the cookies with wide eyes, amazed by the sweet and tasty flavor. Raven stands back and watches Saravi's interaction with the children, his expression softening slightly. The adult elves observe that the human woman possesses an incredibly pure and clear aura. The group's attention shifts as a new figure approaches from the shadows of the village. Happy cheering sounds as the children marvel at the way the lady's hair seems to sparkle. Saravi lets out a bright, joyful laugh at the innocent wonder of the elven children. An elderly elf with a long white beard introduces himself as the village chief. Saravi offers a polite bow and introduces herself with her full formal name. The chief mentions a hidden flow of energy that most humans are completely unable to sense. A bead of nervous sweat rolls down Saravi's face as the chief stares intently at her. He asks the human woman if she has the desire to meet the powerful elf god. Saravi quickly confirms her desire to help and meet the deity in the forest. The elder explains that their god resides deep within the most secluded heart of the forest. He reveals that only someone who possesses primordial beauty has the power to open the door. Raven looks on with a contemplative and serious expression after hearing the chief's cryptic words. Raven looks on and reassures everyone that Saravi will be fine. A sharp crackle sounds as intense energy radiates behind the two. The elder explains they must perform a purification ritual to open the gate and asks if she is prepared. Saravi nods her head in silent agreement as the elder watches her closely. The elderly elf turns his attention to the prince and asks for his gods. Raven dismisses the ritual, claiming he has no personal need for such ceremonies. The prince requests that the elder perform the purification for the lady alone. Raven walks away from the group while the village chief looks on. A soft sigh sounds as the elder notes that the prince seems to understand the situation. The chief invites everyone to proceed toward the altar for the ceremony. A steady rhythm of footsteps sound as they walk through the shimmering, sunlit forest. Raven and the elf boy stand back to observe the ritual from a distance. A nervous gulp sounds as Saravi prepares herself for what is to come. The elder and the lady stand before a stone altar deep in the woods. A light click sounds as the elder places a glowing purple gemstone onto the altar. The rest of the group watches the proceedings with varying levels of concern and curiosity. Saravi kneels on the ground as the elder begins the sacred rite. The lady closes her eyes, focusing her mind as the atmosphere around her shifts. Harsh voices from the past echo in her mind, accusing her of being indifferent and heartless. A soft plip sounds as heavy droplets of water fall onto the lady's white trousers. Saravi begins to weep, mourning the emotions she believed she had long since buried. A heavy thud sounds as the lady collapses, whispering that she never wanted to cause harm. A rustle sounds as Saravi finds the strength to stand, refusing to let differences divide them. The lady stands bathed in a divine light, her gaze filled with a new and unwavering determination. A brilliant flash of light erupts, signaling the arrival of a powerful presence. The elder and the others look on as the blinding radiance fills the clearing. The elf god appears before them, though Saravi observes that its aura feels unexpectedly fragile. Raven warns the boy that the truth would be too shocking for him to handle.
Saravi watches the towering, ethereal figure with a focused expression.
The lady asks the deity what message it is trying to communicate to her. She declares her intention to help the boy fulfill his destiny and role in the forest. The elf god speaks, noting that every living thing possesses its own unique path and fate. Zephyr stares at the scene with wide eyes, overwhelmed by the presence of his god. Saravi admits the truth of the god's words but maintains her resolve to change things. A sudden grab sounds as the boy rushes forward and proudly presents Saravi as his bride. Zephyr praises the lady's kindness and the beauty of her heart to the chief. A tight squeeze sounds as the boy clings to her, reminding her she once called him cute.
The boy looks up with a blush and boldly asks for a kiss to seal their marriage.
A dark thrum sounds as Raven stands in the background, his irritation reaching a boiling point. A sharp tug sounds as the prince lifts the boy into the air by his cloak. Raven issues a final stern warning for the child to remain still and stop his antics. The sunlight flickers as a soft voice interrupts the tension with a quiet question. Saravi turns her attention back toward the silent deity standing before her. The elf god remains motionless, watching the human woman with an inscrutable gaze. A sudden movement sounds as Saravi points an accusing finger toward the forest god. A loud gasp sounds as the elder and the others recoil in shock at her boldness. Saravi points out the god's refusal to permit the ceremony as the root of the forest's chaos. She explains that the lack of a chief has caused the races to suffer and lash out. Raven watches the lady's back, silent as she continues her confrontation with the divine. Saravi stands firm, her silver hair flowing as she demands an answer from the deity. The elf god explains that the child is maturing while the others are simply waiting for the right moment. Raven stares with a cold and piercing gaze. A sharp thud sounds as the prince suddenly grabs the boy by the collar. Raven looks away with a troubled and thoughtful expression. Zephyr admits that he actually agrees with the prince's stance. Raven notes with a side glance that this is the first time they have ever seen eye to eye. A rhythmic step sounds as Raven walks away, telling the god to do as he pleases without causing a scene. The deity warns the prince not to act like an indifferent bystander in his presence. Raven threatens to destroy the deity and replace him with a god of his own creation. The elf god declares that his existence is one and the same with nature itself. Raven mockingly repeats the god's claim about being Minter. A low rumble sounds as Raven summons dark energy to challenge the god's authority over nature. A heavy scraping sounds as a massive, scaly tail begins to manifest through the smoke. A sharp gasp sounds as a terrifying red dragon appears, looming over the frozen group. The deity realizes in shock that even the earth spirits are unable to endure the prince's power. Raven looks on with a grim and unrelenting determination. A thunderous crash sounds as the overwhelming power of the prince strikes. A pained grunt sounds as the elf god is forced to his knees by the crushing pressure. The deity finally yields, granting his permission for the coming-of-age ceremony to proceed. Zephyr and the village elders stare in complete disbelief at the god's sudden submission. A soft rustle sounds as the defeated elf god slowly retreats from the clearings. A heavy panting sounds as Raven hunches over, exhausted by the immense strain of his power. Saravi approaches the prince and asks if he is all right. A sudden shout sounds as Raven recoils, warning the lady to stay away from him. Saravi watches the prince with a look of growing concern and heartache. A dark vision of another woman appears behind the lady, haunting her thoughts. Raven struggles against the internal shadows, ordering the voices to go away. A violent blast sounds as the prince releases a wave of energy, screaming for the lady to stay back. The elves and the elder watch in terror as a blinding light consumes the area. A final, deafening boom sounds as the energy explosion reaches its peak. A worried shout sounds as the lady lies motionless on the cast. Raven struggles to catch his breath as the dark energy finally begins to fade. The prince looks around in a panic, calling out for the lady with a trembling voice. Zephyr rushes forward to cradle the unconscious lady, his face filled with worry. The scene shifts to a peaceful view of the elven village nestled in the trees. Saravi slowly opens her eyes as she hears someone calling her name. Zephyr's face lights up with relief as he asks if she is feeling all right. The lady asks if the boy was able to receive the god's acknowledgement during the chaos. A soft gasp sounds as Saravi realizes that the prince's loss of control was responsible for everything. Saravi offers a warm and reassuring smile to the worried elf boy. A sudden flush sounds as Zephyr blushes intensely at the lady's kindness. The boy stammers and turns away, claiming that the details of the ceremony don't matter right now. The sun shines down on the quiet and beautiful elven settlement. Zephyr stops and tells the lady that there is something important she needs to know. He warns her that the prince is a dangerous and volatile presence who could explode at any moment. Saravi watches the boy run off, absorbing the weight of his dire warning. The lady reflects on the situation and concludes that she has no other choice left.
She realizes that years of deep-seated hatred cannot be washed away so easily.
Saravi decides it might be better for everyone if she no longer remains by the prince's side. Raven stands alone on a hill, staring out at the vast and shimmering forest.
The elder comments that the stars are beautiful today, catching the blonde man off guard.
He explains that beautiful things held in the heart often come to mind. The chief asks Raven what he thought of while gazing at the stars, leaving the prince silent.
Raven admits only one person has occupied his thoughts lately, surprising the village elder.
He describes this person as someone he detests, prompting the elder to ask about his deep dislike. The prince confirms the lady was once a truly hopeless and terrible person. Raven recalls how she used to be selfish, lack manners, and have no sense of values. He notes that she suddenly changed her nature and began helping the vulnerable. The prince remembers her preparing food and worrying about the exhaustion of those training around her. Raven reflects on how she has seemingly become a completely different person who thinks of others. He admits he initially suspected her kindness was an insidious act meant to trap him. The man had scoffed at her change, certain that he would never be fooled by her. Raven notes that the more he observed her, the more genuine her smile began to feel.
Saravi's gentle and radiant smile fills his thoughts.
A soft flush colors his cheeks as he admits he started wishing her kindness was real. Raven fears he would feel more uncomfortable now if she were to revert to her old self. He confesses that acting like a normal human makes things easier, and asks if her constant changes are unfair. Raven looks on with a dark intensity, claiming his feelings are rooted in heartbreak and trauma. The elder asks if he remembers a specific phrase, which the prince recalls as being quite vague. A look of shock crosses Raven's face as he wonders how the chief knew his thoughts.
The elder clarifies he is speaking about the true meaning of the word beautiful.
He explains that beauty represents one's true ideal form, causing Raven to repeat the definition in thought.
A close-up of the prince's golden eye reveals his deep contemplation about his own identity.
A soft rustle sounds as the elder asks if beauty isn't a lovely word to use. Raven realizes the condition for meeting God, primordial beauty, actually means being naturally true to oneself.
A look of sudden realization flashes in the prince's eyes.
He recalls the ethereal presence of the elf god they encountered in the forest. Raven remembers the lady's past acts of kindness toward commoners and children. He concludes that the lady is currently existing in her true and ideal form. The prince realizes the possibility of her ever returning to her past personality is non-existent.
The elder smiles warmly while noting the exceptional beauty of the stars tonight.
Narration explains that the expeditionary force returned to the castle the next day with help from the elves. A magical circle glows on the ground, indicating only the lady and Emperor Raven remain behind. Zephyr clings to the lady and begs her not to leave while she notes the others departed long ago.
Saravi gently pats the young boy's head, comforting him in his sadness.
She makes a pinky promise to the boy, giving him her word that they will meet again.
The elf boy secretly hopes that they can be married the next time they see one another.
Zephyr smiles brightly at the lady's kindness, while Raven fumes with jealousy in the background. Raven commands her to go as he enters the teleportation circle while Saravi asks him to wait.
The lady looks around in a panic, fearing she is the only one being left behind. A sharp clap sounds as Raven suddenly grabs her hand and asks what she is doing. The prince pulls the lady into a firm embrace as the teleportation magic activates around them. Raven notes that she is acting as if she has never experienced teleportation before. Saravi admits she was briefly distracted, prompting the prince to warn her against accepting every request. The lady offers a final wave to the crying boy as they begin to vanish. Raven looks ahead with a furious and unwavering expression. The elderly village chief watches the teleportation process with a calm gaze. The prince and the lady stand side by side as they prepare to return home. The elder smiles as he observes the pair departing from the elven settlement. A blinding radiance consumes the area as the two finally teleport away from the forest.
Sunlight glints off the palace.
Saravi collapses in Madame. Raven asks if she lost muscle mass after her injury, but she dismisses his prying and claims she is uninterested. Saravi wonders if she can survive in this world after experiencing teleportation for the first time. Raven reaches for the lady's hair. Saravi is confused by his kindness, noting that he usually pays her no attention at all. A soft rustle sounds as the lady thanks the prince while wondering what is wrong with him. Saravi recalls the boy's warning and worries that the prince might actually explode from the pressure. Raven attempts to apologize for his actions, explaining that it was too late to speak the previous night. Saravi's eyes widen in shock. Raven claims he never meant to hurt her, causing Saravi to beg him to stop pushing himself. Raven asks her to treat him as she normally would, leaving her to wonder what that request means. Raven stares on with total confusion. Saravi gleefully begs the prince to insult her amidst a bright floral backdrop. Narration confirms the successful completion of Zephyr's ceremony and the team's return to the castle.
A group of cadets watches as their companion desperately begs to be insulted.
The surrounding knights react with shock.
Chibi versions of the cadets peek out while questioning who the strange woman is and what happened.
Demian asks them to step aside to avoid trouble as he prepares to remove the cadets.
A quick dash sounds as Demian questions if the strange scene was part of a play. Demian's expression becomes cold and serious. Demian warns them not to speak so openly in public as Saravi offers a quiet apology.
He reprimands the lady for her problematic statements and scolds Raven for arguing loudly, which the prince blames on her behavior.
A frustrated shout sounds as Demian declares that maintaining the prince's dignity is vital for the palace's order.
A pained sounds as Demian suddenly coughs up a spray of blood.
A heavy thud sounds as Demian collapses, prompting a terrified shout for his name from the lady.
The pair looks down in horror. A voice asks about the patient's condition while the doctor considers the situation. The doctor examines Demian as Raven and Saravi watch with visible question marks over their heads. A soft snoring sounds as the doctor explains that Demian's collapse was caused by severe sleep deprivation and poor health. The doctor states that avoiding stress and getting sufficient rest will allow for a quick recovery. He asks for everyone's cooperation, prompting Raven to agree while Saravi laughs nervously. Saravi asks if Demian will be all right as they walk through the opulent hall. Raven explains that he was the one who personally requested Demian help. Demian rests peacefully while narration notes his long struggle with insomnia and lack of previous health issues. Saravi reflects on Damian's secret illness, surprised that someone who always seemed so composed suffered from insomnia. Raven mentions troublesome statements, catching Saravi off guard. The lady asks if she embarrassed him earlier, unaware of why he is currently irritated. Raven looms over the lady as she admits she doesn't understand his anger. He explains he only acted that way to make her feel better and questions her request to be ignored and insulted. Saravi explains that she wanted him to treat her that way because it is what he is used to. She wonders what the problem is since she told him he didn't have to force himself to be nice. The two stand in silence. Saravi believes the prince dislikes her acting sacrificial and decides there is no longer a need to worry. She prepares to speak her mind. Saravi announces with determination that she is quitting as of today. She vows to disappear from his line of sight, leaving Raven to ask what she meant in shock. A joyful laugh sounds as Saravi realizes that staying away from him is the perfect solution. Saravi realizes her destination is the kitchen. Raven and Saravi stare in silence. Raven watches the lady leave, frustrated by her continued self-centered behavior. A quick tsk sounds as Raven storms off, leaving the white-haired lady looking back in total confusion. Raven believes she never cared for his opinion while the lady senses something is fundamentally wrong. The lady questions why the prince appeared so genuinely hurt by her words. The blonde man marches down the hall as the lady remains behind, lost in her thoughts. The grand and ornate imperial palace stands bathed in the afternoon sun. Two knights greet the lady as she wanders through the opulent corridors. A quick dash sounds as the lady vanishes instantly, leaving the knights to wonder if they saw a ghost. Raven looms behind the terrified knights and questions their strange talk of ghosts in the palace. The panicked knights quickly dismiss their previous claim as a mere trick of the light. The prince stands alone, absorbing their words with a serious and contemplative expression. A soft panting sounds as the lady realizes she nearly ran straight into the man she is trying to avoid. She recalls the elf boy's warning about the prince's volatile nature and decides it is best to keep her distance. Chibi Saravi desperately searches for a secret place where she can hide and find some peace. The lady enters the massive imperial library, marveling at the sheer scale of the book collection. A soft rustle sounds as she begins searching through the shelves for a romance novel. Her eyes widen as she spots an unexpected title on the shelf. She finds a book on culinary magic, feeling nostalgic for her school days and wondering about its use in this world. Sunlight streams through the high windows of the quiet, towering library. Deep within the stacks, Raven quietly browses the library's expansive collection. The prince peers through a gap in the books, his attention caught by someone nearby.
A close-up of his golden eyes reveals a focused and intense gaze.
Delicate white lilies bloom in the bright, airy atmosphere of the library. The white-haired lady sits at a desk, peacefully immersed in her reading. Raven watches her from the shadows of the bookshelves, observing her quiet concentration. The lady stops reading, sensing a sudden presence nearby. Raven approaches the desk and asks if she has become an entirely different person, catching her off guard. A startled yelp sounds as the lady wonders why the prince seems to appear wherever she goes. Raven questions her reaction to his presence while she tries to explain her surprise. He notes it is his first time seeing her read, and she awkwardly admits the news might be shocking. The lady explains her interest in culinary magic as the prince listens with quiet intrigue. Raven questions why she's studying so hard if she still intends to quit her duties.
He looks at her with an unwavering and expectant gaze.
The lady enthusiastically confirms her desire to learn new things. A soft tisk sounds as the prince offers a rare, subtle smile and acknowledges her answer. A close-up of a pink-haired woman reveals a mysterious and satisfied smile. The pink-haired woman suddenly appears, surprising both Raven and the lady in the library. Rosaline greets the pair with a formal curtsy, catching them by surprise. The pink-haired woman smiles brightly while making an observation about someone being alone. The lady fakes a fainting spell, claiming she is too exhausted to stay any longer. A quick dash sounds as she recalls fleeing from Rosaline, who had wanted to spend more time together. She remembers promising the pink-haired woman that they would play until morning next time. The lady looks on in silent horror as she realizes the weight of the promise she made. The midday sun shines brightly over the sprawling and elegant palace gardens. The lady collapses on the floor in a heap, feeling completely drained of energy. A sudden gasp sounds as the lady realizes Rosaline has been watching her the whole time. Rosaline looms over the terrified lady with an obsessive gaze, reminding her of their promise to play until morning. The quiet library remains bathed in soft golden light. Rosaline hums to herself while browsing the shelves, wondering when her friend will arrive. A sharp yipe sounds as the lady stares in terror while Rosaline looks on with mild curiosity. The white-haired lady hides behind a shelf, hoping the pink-haired woman didn't spot her. Golden sunlight pours through the grand windows of the palace hallway. A guard asks if the blonde prince is heading to the library again. Two cadets watch Raven pass, admiring his dedication and constant hard work. Raven feels drained from training, envying those who can nap whenever they please. He spots Saravi sprawled on the floor and wishes he could join her. A startled yelp sounds as the prince questions her behavior and she jumps up. Raven deduces she crawled away to avoid being seen by Rosaline in the library. He quietly considers that she might actually have a hidden talent for stealth. Looking down at her, Raven offers a sarcastic compliment on her current state. The prince asks if there's anything else she needs to explain as she stares blankly. Raven offers his assistance, but the lady quickly refuses to be a burden. He offers to fetch books, yet she claims she has already adapted to the library.
A perplexed look crosses Raven's face as she tells him to take care.
Quiet library aisles remain bathed in the warm glow of the afternoon sun. Raven continues browsing the collection, eventually selecting a specific volume from the shelf. He finds her dismissal frustrating after he went out of his way to be kind. The prince grows irritated, considering her sudden aloofness to be the height of rudeness. He fumes over why she suddenly treats him like a stranger she actively dislikes. Raven recalls a past encounter where he bluntly rejected her offer of handmade cookies. He admits to himself that his previous behavior makes his current complaint difficult. A sudden call for his attention interrupts the prince's brooding thoughts. Rosaline appears with a bright smile, offering the prince a jar of fresh cookies. Raven stares at the pink-haired woman with a look of silent, cold indifference. The scene shifts as the cadets celebrate their luck after receiving the prince's cookies. One of the young men announces his hunger with a joyful shout. A strange silence falls as the two cadets enjoy the unexpected royal treat. Saravi watches from the floor as a cadet happily snacks on the heart-shaped cookies. She realizes she blundered and worries that the prince might truly hate her now. A soft thud sounds as the prince returns and rests a book on her head. Saravi asks about the boy's letter while Raven mentions needing to offer an apology. The prince casually wonders if he should execute the boy, leaving the lady speechless. Raven reveals he was only joking, though the lady remains visibly shaken by his words. She realizes that such jokes are terrifying when they come from someone with his power. Raven sits beside her and promises to share something interesting with her. A sharp gasp sounds as the prince leans in, catching the lady completely off guard. He presents the book on culinary magic, much to her surprise and confusion. Raven explains that he hears everything that happens within the palace walls. The lady hesitates to accept the book as the prince holds it out. Raven asks why she refuses to take the gift he personally selected. Saravi shouts that being near her is dangerous and she must keep her distance. She claims it's for his protection, prompting Raven to demand a proper explanation. The lady hides her face, overwhelmed by the absurdity of the entire situation. Sunlight glints off the ornate chandeliers in the empty palace corridor. Raven realizes the elf boy told her he becomes a time bomb near her. A loud shout sounds as Saravi defends the elf's instincts while Raven loses his cuppa. Raven explains his stress was due to protecting the only civilian in a dangerous forest.
Saravi admits her misunderstanding while the prince claims he was only fulfilling his royal duties.
The lady smiles warmly, assuring him she no longer misinterprets his actions. Raven fumes over the elf's ridiculous rumors while the lady worries about what to do next. Chibi Saravi asks if this is the only book while Chibi Raven watches. Saravi holds the volume, lamenting her inability to visit the library.
Chibi Saravi hopes her plan works while the prince watches silently.
Raven is stunned to see his magic actually working.
The prince admits this is his first time succeeding.
Saravi explains her magical ambitions, leaving Raven deeply perplexed.
Both characters stare in a state of mutual confusion.
Raven asks if she has ever taken a magic test. The lady repeats the question, looking completely lost. A serious expression crosses the blonde prince's face. Narrative text explains that magic requires one essential trait. Saravi recalls her past attempt to verify her magical potential.
Raven leads the lady to a massive set of testing doors.
A sudden sharp pop sounds as Raven grabs her arm. Brilliant blue energy flows as Raven heals her injury. Saravi realizes with shock that all her pain is gone.
She marvels at his skill while he dismisses it as basic.
A lush rosebush provides a brief scene transition.
Raven challenges the lady to lift a small stone. He explains the stone becomes lighter for those with dower.
A nervous gulp sounds as Saravi prepares to kai.
She reaches out toward the small, dark testing stone.
An intense shock hits them both as she makes contact.
Chibi Saravi effortlessly raises the stone high into the air. She tosses the weight lightly, doubting its authenticity.
Raven remembers how previous magic also failed to affect her. A quick swish sounds as she examines the tiny stone.
The prince decides that far more rigorous testing is necessary.
Saravi looks back at him with total bewilderment. They enter a hall filled with the kingdom's imperial mages.
The gathered mages grumble about their interrupted research.
Saravi feels terrified by the strange, murmuring crowd.
She realizes that something very serious is about to happen.
Raven points out that mages will now cast spells on her.
Saravi is horrified to be treated like a lab rat. Raven offers a bright smile while confirming her role.
A soft ding sounds as Chibi Saravi freezes in despair.
The mages line up, eager to attempt various transformations. Robed scholars discuss the possibility of her neutralizing their magic. The grumpy elder mages complain about the sudden summons.
An old mage shouts for the others to ask Raven. The two stand before the sea of skeptical, robed figures.
A few mages look at Raven with nervous adoration.
The scholars prepare to demonstrate their most powerful spells.
A mage with a glowing staff steps forward to start.
A quick zoom sounds as he unleashes his magic.
Both characters stand in silence when nothing happens.
The mage shouts a command to turn her into a cat.
Saravi remains unchanged, leaving the mage completely baffled.
He desperately tries to turn her into a man instead.
Despite the mage's efforts, the spell fails to affect the white-haired lady.
The mages celebrate the prince's successful experimental magic as the sun shines on the palace.
Raven remains humble as the robed scholars claim his name will go down in history.
The blonde prince accepts their parting praises with a polite nod as they take their leave.
Raven feels drained by the social interaction, while Saravi observes his introverted nature.
The prince gazes intently at her, remarking that her body is far more extraordinary than he imagined.
He explains that neither elven healing nor human magic affects her because she repels all spells. A loud shout sounds as the blonde prince suddenly demands to know why this is the case.
Saravi realizes he can read her face perfectly while she marvels at their ability to converse.
Raven clarifies that despite her resistance to others, his magic is the only power that works.
Saravi wonders if her status as a possessor or her predecessor's obsession caused this unique bond.
The lady grows distressed as she realizes her magical nullification might prevent her from learning magic.
Raven reassures her that using her own power is an entirely separate matter. She points out the inconsistency, noting she successfully used teleportation magic created by someone else.
The prince explains that teleportation only connects spaces and doesn't require magic to flow into her body.
Saravi holds the green volume, asking if she can successfully perform the culinary magic within its pages. Rosaline watches from a distance as Raven mockingly compares her ambitious request to a child writing novels.
A close-up of the pink-haired woman reveals a look of cold, calculating suspicion.
Raven orders the lady to visit his office tomorrow for magic lessons during her breaks.
Brilliant midday light reflects off the pristine white domes of the royal palace.
Several leather-bound books rest on a polished desk, waiting to be studied.
Raven broods over the green book, finding it too complex for a beginner to understand. He selects a simpler volume titled The Structure of Simple Magic, decorated with cute animal stickers.
A sharp gasp sounds as the prince is suddenly startled by a noise.
A firm, quick knock sounds against the heavy wooden door of the office. Chibi Raven frantically hides his books and assumes a dignified posture at his desk. He calls for the visitor to enter while looking on with a sharp, expectant gaze. Rosaline enters the room in a state of visible distress, tearfully asking for help. Raven's expression hardens into a look of serious concern as she mentions Saravi's name. A loud thud sounds as the prince slams his hands down, demanding an explanation.
Rosaline wails dramatically amidst a backdrop of roses, lamenting that Saravi won't play with her.
A heavy silence falls over the room as the prince stares in blank disbelief. Raven dismisses her rudely, claiming he is too busy for her petty complaints. Saravi walks down the hallway alone, her expression clouded with deep thought. She worries that the prince's newfound kindness deviates too much from the original story's tragedy.
The lady stops in her tracks as she hears Rosaline speaking inside the office.
Rosaline claims that Saravi has been acting incredibly strange lately, catching the prince's attention.
The pink-haired woman insists that her next piece of news will be truly shocking. She leans over the desk, asking if the prince is aware of Saravi's secret activities.
Rosaline dramatically reveals that Saravi has actually been trying to learn how to cook.
She informs Raven about the master of the establishment where the lady currently works. Raven remains completely unimpressed, asking why she is still bothering him with such trivial news. Saravi listens from the hallway as the pink-haired woman wonders if it's time to head back. A loud crack sounds as Rosaline slams the desk, asking if he's truly okay with this. She reminds him of all the interesting and dangerous experiences he's had because of Saravi. Rosaline brings up the dark memory of his food being spiked with dangerous drugs. She claims her interference is out of concern for his safety while he watches coldly. A sharp smack sounds as the prince asserts that he is not weak enough to need her worry.
Raven sits back in his chair, looking at the pen in his hand with a neutral expression.
Rosaline wears a chillingly satisfied smile as she reflects on the tragic nature of the situation. Narrative flashback explains that Mariette only had tea with the crown prince, yet Saravi killed her for it.
A sharp gasp sounds as the white-haired lady reacts with pure shock to the revelation.
The brown-haired maid explains that Mariette was so famous that not a single soul in the country was unaware of her.
Visuals depict a shadowy hand pouring liquid as the maid recounts rumors of Mariette slipping an aphrodisiac into the prince's food. A quick snap sounds as Saravi realizes she was not the one who snuck into the royal bedroom that night. Flashback reveals that after being coldly rejected, the woman took her own life by drinking poison right in front of the prince. Narrative text suggests that while Saravi has stalker tendencies, she would never resort to poisoning food or public suicide.
Saravi asks the brown-haired maid to clarify the name of the woman mentioned in the story.
The name Mariette is displayed prominently against a dark, swirling background of mystical energy. A loud boom sounds as Saravi reels from the devastating and unexpected impact of the news.
The white-haired lady questions if she really did kill the woman in her past life as the original villainess.
Saravi spirals into a state of panic over the horrifying thought of possessing the body of a psychopathic murderer. She's shaken to realize her predecessor's dark actions went far beyond the typical behavior of a crazy woman. A soft sniffle sounds as she cries, overwhelmed by the realization that she was also the one who used the aphrodisiac. Narrative text notes that Saravi would not even be alive today if not for the influence of House Pranayas. A quick wink sounds as Rosaline calls the entire situation truly tragic while facing the blonde prince. Raven watches with a cold and analytical expression as the pink-haired woman continues her performance. Rosaline feigns a shock as she realizes her judgment of the situation might have been incorrect. She insists that Saravi is a precious friend, while claiming she only wants to prevent any more victims like Mariette. Rosaline puts on a deeply worried face, expressing her concern that her dear friend might choose the wrong path again. Raven finds her act utterly sickening, his skin crawling as a dark scribble symbolically obscures the pink-haired woman's face. The blonde prince hands her a letter, dismissively claiming his actions are born from being a compassionate soul. A quick puff sounds as Raven smiles slightly, noting that he had momentarily forgotten something. Raven stands amidst a shower of roses, thanking Rosaline for helping him remember useful things. A soft ding sounds as Rosaline blushes, clearly delighted to have been of help to the prince. Narrative text explains that Raven has a mountain of government affairs to attend to and cannot spare any more time. Raven charmingly asks if a thoughtful lady like her would understand his need to return to work. A quick swish sounds as Rosaline curtsies and prepares to take her leave of the royal office. A firm, rhythmic tapping sounds as the pink-haired woman walks away down the empty palace hallway. Rosaline pauses mid-walk and turns around as she hears a sudden voice calling out. She recognizes Demian, noting his handsome appearance while acknowledging his status as one of the prince's subordinates. A quick curtsy sounds as she greets the brown-haired man before continuing on her way. A steady, clicking tap sounds as the pink-haired lady resumes her walk down the ornate corridor. Demian and Saravi stand together, the atmosphere between them heavy with a sense of unspoken tension. A soft squeeze sounds as the lady clenches her fists, her expression clouded with inner distress. Narrative text highlights her internal struggle with the idea of being a psychopathic murderer and a predator. The two characters face each other in the center of the grand and silent palace hallway. A quick snap sounds as Demian hesitates, his expression revealing he has something difficult to say. Saravi looks back at him with a wide-eyed and expectant gaze, waiting for him to speak. A heavy silence stretches between them as they stand in the middle of the high-ceilinged corridor. A sudden clatter sounds as Saravi grabs Demian's arm, urgently demanding they go somewhere private to talk. The scene shifts to a palace balcony where Demian confirms his willingness to answer her questions. Saravi explains that ever since a certain point, her memory has been fuzzy and her situation has become difficult. They stand together on the balcony in silence, both lost in their own thoughts for a moment. Saravi pleads with the brown-haired man to tell her everything he knows about the past incident. Flashback shows a hand pouring liquid from a bottle as rumors of a noble lady's attack circulate. The memory depicts the tragic aftermath of Mariette taking her own life on the floor after being rejected. A dark silhouette appears as the lady realizes the name she heard was the one Rosaline mentioned earlier. A quick crack sounds as Demian expresses surprise at her specific phrasing about the timing of the events. Narrative text explains that during his time assisting the prince, Demian learned the hidden truth about the matter. Demian tells Saravi about the hidden truth. A flashback recounts that a specific visitor came to the prince's bedroom. A quick clatter sounds as a hand turns a door handle. Raven opens the door and is shocked to see his visitors. Raven questions why 3 servants are visiting him in the middle of the night. The blonde maid trembles while addressing the prince. A heavy thud sounds as the maid falls to her knees, relieved he's safe. Raven is stunned to learn about an aphrodisiac in his suit. The dark-haired maid explains her relief at seeing the prince unharmed. She sighs, noting these incidents happen because he refuses food sampling. Raven reminds them of his strength and dismisses their worries. The prince stands with his arms crossed while listening. The blonde maid lets out a small whimper of protest. A loud shout sounds as the maid warns him not to be careless.
She insists that even small mistakes could cost them your lives.
A sharp gasp sounds as the maid realizes her mistake. A quick thud sounds as the maid bows deeply, apologizing. She begs the prince for his forgiveness. A soft swish sounds as Raven tells her to raise her head. He promises to keep the incident secret so they won't worry. Raven apologizes and promises to allow poison testing in the future. A bright cheer sounds as the servants celebrate his decision. Raven confirms his understanding of the situation. A soft creak sounds as Raven begins to close the door.
The 3 servants walk away down the quiet hallway. A firm slam sounds as Raven's thoughts reflect on his safety.
Raven stands alone in his room, looking contemplative. The prince closes his eyes, lost in thought. A soft tap sounds as his fingers drum against his ohm. A quick snap sounds as Raven stops and senses a presence. The prince turns, asking if someone else is in the room. Raven looks toward the door with a guarded expression. Saravi appears, her expression full of concern. She asks about suspicious people while Raven looks exhausted. The lady continues questioning him about potential attackers.
Saravi grows frantic as she demands to know who attacked.
A soft swish sounds as Raven questions what she is talking about. Saravi tries to argue while Raven remains firm. Raven tells her to leave, claiming she has crossed a line.
A sudden gasp sounds as Saravi spots something outside.
She rushes to the balcony, shouting to identify the intruder. A heavy sigh sounds as Raven watches her search. Saravi finds evidence of a woman's presence. She turns back to Raven urgently, claiming someone broke in. A loud shout sounds as Raven loses his patience. Saravi insists on the truth of her claim. A firm step sounds as Raven orders guards to cake her. Saravi struggles, begging Raven to believe her. A sharp creak sounds as the door begins to close. Raven rubs his forehead and sighs in exhaustion. The blonde prince asserts that he has reached the limit of his patience. Voices from behind the library doors announce the crown prince's arrival and grant him permission to enter. A quick clatter sounds as Raven bows deeply before his father to pay his humble respects to the monarch. The mustached emperor greets his son, noting it has been a long time and asking what brings him by so early. Looking serious, the prince informs his father that there is something important he wishes to speak about. The emperor laughs as he mentions hearing from Duke Praeneus about Saravis's visit to Raven the previous night. When asked if they spent the night together, the prince sharply denies having any interest in the lady. The emperor suggests a marriage would be joyous, explaining that the duke himself made the suggestion.
Raven remains firm in his rejection, reminding his father that he has stated his feelings many times before.
A quick rattle sounds as the emperor laments his son's coldness, wondering why he can't be friendly with her as they were in childhood. While the monarch speaks of noble prestige, Raven reflects on the horror of Saravi putting an aphrodisiac in his food.
The 2 sit in a tense and heavy silence within the grand royal office.
A cold and analytical atmosphere settles toward his son. A soft clink sounds as a hand sets a blue teacup down onto its matching saucer. The emperor dismissively asks if they should arrest a high-ranking noble's daughter, sparking a frustrated shout from Raven. A firm knock sounds as a servant announces that another duke has arrived for a royal audience. A quick rattle sounds as the emperor stands, complaining about how slowly the other nobles move. A quick swish sounds as the monarch dismisses Raven, suggesting he return later so the emperor can attend to more pressing affairs. Raven demands to know if politics are more important than him, while the Emperor explains the nation's economic reality. Dark silhouettes of the nobility drink wine as the Emperor notes that national order depends on keeping them compliant. Walking away, the Emperor claims it is his duty to indulge the nobles to prevent them from entertaining dangerous thoughts. A loud shout sounds as Raven questions if his father is aware of the filthy things the nobles do in secret. A heavy sigh sounds as the Emperor remarks that his son lacks the flexibility needed for his position. He explains that acting on whims would result in massive instability and the deaths of countless soldiers. Raven stands trembling with fury as he begins to retort about the true cost of moral compromise. The blonde Emperor continues to walk away, his back turned to his son's growing rage. A sharp creak sounds as Raven orders the doors to be opened as he prepares to storm out of the imperial chambers. A quick stomp sounds as the prince bitterly asks if everyone around the Emperor has died because he chooses to be so flexible. A quick tap sounds as Raven reflects on how the monarch can smile after trampling over everyone to keep his throne. The blonde prince wears a chillingly satisfied smile as he reflects on his father's blissful lack of concern. A quick swish sounds as the Emperor stops and looks back with a shocked expression, questioning what his son just said. A hearty laugh sounds as the Emperor suddenly praises his son for finally understanding the cold reality of power. A soft tap sounds as the father pats Raven's shoulder, relieved that he has gained the necessary traits of a ruler. The Emperor strides out through the open palace doors, leaving the prince alone in the room. A soft sigh sounds as Raven passes a group of 3 servants waiting outside in the palace corridor. The scene shifts to Raven's private office, where he sits alone at his large wooden desk. Raven stretches in his chair and notes that he feels strangely clear-headed despite being physically tired. The blonde prince gasps as a sudden and vivid realization strikes in.
He recalls Saravi's obsessive affection when she offered him cookies and his own cold rejection of her.
Raven realizes that the current peace he enjoys is only possible because Saravi is no longer around. A firm knock sounds as the prince considers ways to remove the social menace before inviting the visitor inside. A short-haired maid enters the office to announce the arrival of Lady Mariette for their meeting. A quick swish sounds as Raven stands up and realizes he had forgotten his scheduled appointment. 3 maids whispering together note that the prince seems to be in an exceptionally good mood today. The group of maids continues to gossip and giggle in agreement while watching Raven walk down the hallway. Raven pauses and looks back suspiciously, feeling like someone is staring at him from behind. The maids wonder aloud about the nature of the relationship between the prince and Lady Mariette. They gigglingly speculate that the two will end up dating, unaware that their target is listening. Turning back, Raven dryly informs the maids that he can hear every word of their conversation. The prince looks on with a neutral expression as the maids clumsily apologize for their intrusive curiosity. The sky is a clear, vibrant blue as someone mentions they heard there was something important to discuss. Raven, the white-haired prince, and Mariette, the red-haired lady, are seen sitting at an elegant table in a sunlit garden. Mariette nervously confirms that she does indeed have something to speak about. Raven takes a contemplative sip from his teacup while thinking about a rumored confession. A soft sip sounds.
Mariette suddenly shouts her love, causing Raven to spit out his tea in shock. A loud pft sounds.
Mariette looks completely stunned and embarrassed by her own impulsive outburst.
Raven considers how the happiness of the person he loves is synonymous with his own joy.
Mariette finishes her statement expressing that her feelings come from the bottom of her heart. Raven tries to hide a smile as he finds her sincerity deeply amusing. A soft pff sounds.
Raven breaks out into a hearty laugh while a flustered chibi version of Mariette appears below him. Mariette looks on with a confused and slightly hurt expression as Raven continues to laugh. Mariette quickly drinks her tea to avoid the prince's gaze. A quick gulp sends.
Raven admits that this is the very first time he has received such a sudden and direct confession. The blonde prince winks playfully, looking incredibly charming and self-assured. Raven notices her reaction and asks if anything is the matter. A heavy, expectant silence falls between the two as they sit at the ornate garden table. A sudden, tragic memory of a body falling to the ground flashes through the scene. A heavy thud sounds. Mariette is shown collapsed on a floral rug with a spilled drink while voices frantically call for a doctor. Raven is seen kneeling over Mariette's unconscious form as maids rush toward them in a panic. A sharp gasp sounds. Raven walks away from the scene with a cold and determined look while a maid calls out to him. Saravi, the silver-haired lady, watches the unfolding drama from behind the safety of some bushes. Consumed by a terrifying rage, Raven demands to know how someone could dare to commit such an act. A loud roar sounds. Saravi stammers out a terrified denial as she faces the prince's intense and glowing eyes. The scene shifts to earlier as Mariette is watched by a mysterious figure from behind the hedges. A hand is shown pouring a packet of white powder into a floral teacup.
A soft rustle sounds. The mysterious powder quickly dissolves into the liquid inside the blue teacup. A soft swish sounds.
Saravi watches from a distance, her profile looking focused and somewhat troubled.
Mariette realizes that Saravi was the one who put an aphrodisiac in the tea and contemplates whether she should just spill it.
A malicious smile spreads across Saravi's face as she decides she needs a more thorough revenge. Saravi continues to hide behind the garden greenery, keeping a close eye on Mariette. A soft rustle sounds.
Saravi tosses a small object toward the red-haired lady. A quick toss sounds. Mariette is startled as a small stone hits the ground right in front of her. A quick clack sounds.
Mariette looks around the garden, wondering if Raven is the one calling for her.
A close-up shows Mariette's face filled with confusion and uncertainty. Another stone is thrown, catching Mariette's attention and making her look toward the palace. A quick tap sounds. Mariette turns her head, sensing someone is beckoning her from the palace entrance.
Mariette walks through the glass doors while Saravi watches her leave the garden from the shadows. A quick click sounds.
Inside the palace, a maid politely asks if there is anything she can help Lady Mariette with.
Saravi approaches the garden table and asks a maid when the crown prince is expected to arrive.
Mariette peeks out from behind a pillar while Saravi walks toward the tea set. Mariette leans against the wall and lets out a long breath of relief. A soft huff sounds. Mariette looks thoughtful, realizing that her plan is beginning to take shape. Mariette notices that the garden atmosphere feels different than it did before. A soft tap sounds.
Saravi, now sitting at the table, begins to feel uneasy and wonders if she has been found out. A sharp gasp sounds.
While Mariette feels her anxiety fading, Saravi plots to humiliate Mariette by claiming she poisoned the prince's drink.
Saravi is suddenly shaken by the sound of someone yelling for help and calling for a doctor for Mariette. A sharp thud sounds. Raven stands with a dark and menacing aura, shouting his demand for an explanation once more. A loud roar sounds.
Saravi stares up in absolute horror, her face pale as she confronts the prince's wrath. A wide shot shows the magnificent white palace with its blue domes under the bright sun.
Saravi points toward the fallen Mariette, accusing her of being in Raven's bedroom the previous night.
Saravi recalls the intense moment she insisted she was alone in the room. She remembers witnessing a mysterious hand secretly adding powder to a teacup.
Thinking it was an aphrodisiac, Saravi switched the cups to shame the culprit. Saravi openly accused Mariette of poisoning the prince's cup, shocking them.
Ravens turn toward a voice addressing him as his Havis. Demian leans in to whisper something private to the prince as they stand together.
Narrative text explains that matching poison on Mariette's dress led to a suicide ruling.
An intense gaze from Raven shifts Sarava's thoughts toward a terrifying realization of murder.
The discovery of identical toxins on the dress seemed to confirm the tragic conclusion.
Demian approaches Saravi on the balcony to discuss the lack of evidence against her.
He notes that no clear proof exists linking Lady Saravi to the poisoning incident. Labeling the daughter of a prominent house as a culprit was a difficult judgment.
Two men share a hearty laugh, reflecting the political weight behind the prince's decision.
Despite the evidence, a woman drinking from a vial signals the end of Mariette.
Saravi listens intently as Demian confirms her lack of direct involvement. Tormented by the past, Saravi questions if she was truly responsible for the death. Demian watches her with a soft, contemplative expression.
He firmly voices his belief that Saravi is not the true culprit behind the tragedy.
A quiet, sincere aura surrounds Demian as he stands by his word.
He simply admits that his belief is based on a strong personal feeling.
The two share a moment of silence as Saravi processes his unexpected support.
Saravi thanks Demian for his trust as they stand together on the balcony.
The grand palace stands peacefully under a bright, clear sky.
Saravi clenches her teeth, struggling with her scattered memories.
Emily offers a warm, encouraging smile to her troubled lady. Seeing her lady's frustration, Emily notes that something is clearly on Saravi's mind.
Saravi agonizes over a mysterious strand of hair, unsure of who to ask.
Emily's eyes light up with a sudden, helpful idea.
They sit together as Emily prepares to offer a crucial piece of advice.
Emily suggests identifying another person with hair matching the mysterious strand.
A sudden flash of realization reflects the image of Rosaline in Sarava's eye.
A dark realization settles over her as the truth begins to surface.
Rosaline stands elegantly among white roses, her true nature hidden behind a smile. In a memory, Rosaline calls out to Saravi in the ornate hallway. Rosaline claims that Raven is secretly meeting a lover in his bedroom tonight.
Saravi is stunned by the rumor, finding the idea of a secret lover impossible.
She looks away, struggling to believe the gossip about the prince.
Rosaline questions why Saravi is so skeptical about the prince's private life.
Saravi recalls seeing Raven head to his office in the early morning hours.
She remembers his grueling schedule of paperwork, sword training, and late nights.
Narrative text confirms the prince has absolutely no time for secret trysts. Saravi stands alone in the hall, processing the logic of Raven's busy life. Rosalind dismisses Saravi's doubts, insisting they go investigate the rumor together. She grabs Saravi's arm, reminding her of Raven's elite military background. Rosaline suggests Raven could easily hide secret meetings from ordinary people. A wave of shock washes over Saravi at the implication of secret meetings. Rosaline urges a panicked Saravi to calm down and check for herself. They bicker over whether the prince's claimed lack of interest was actually a lie. Narrative text questions if Raven would ever tell such a blatant falsehood. Saravi realizes with horror that Rosaline may have been lying to her all along. The silver-haired lady concludes there is only one possibility. She vows to protect Raven from any intruders. A narrative voice notes her refusal to listen. A pink-haired maid recalls Saravi sneaking into the prince's room. The maid appears deeply concerned by these events. A strange behavior is noted in the text. Saravi asks the maid if Rosaline was acting oddly. The maid describes Rosaline's suspicious movements in the room. Saravi dismisses the maid's concerns as unnecessary worry. The scene shifts back to Saravi's private chambers. Saravi catches the red-haired Rosaline hiding by her egg. Rosaline appears startled by Saravi's sudden arrival. Rosaline claims she is searching for a lost Hethan.
Saravi notes the missing item is not visible.
Rosalind dismisses the offer to help hide it. Saravi wonders if Rosalind has caught a cold. Saravi asks about the rumor of sneaking into bedrooms. Saravi notes that Raven was angry about the incident. Rosaline claims the prince's room was entirely empty. Saravi insists she saw someone escaping through the window. Saravi reveals she found her red hair as proof. Rosalind confirms the found strand is indeed red. Saravi ponders who would be fooled. Rosaline privately mocks Saravi for being so foolish. Dark tension grows between the two noble ladies. Rosaline suggests Mariette might be the actual culprit. Rosaline emphasizes the similarity in their hair color. Rosaline agrees that framing Mariette is a possibility. Rosaline feigns disappointment in Mariette's supposed actions. Mariette's interest in Raven is brought up suspiciously. The idea of Mariette's involvement is solidified. The pink-haired maid questions Mariette's sudden involvement. She notes Rosaline shares the same hat tiller. The maid watches Saravi with growing uncertainty. Saravi defends Rosaline's supposedly kind and helpful intentions. The maid reluctantly agrees with her lady's assessment. Days pass over the bright palace domes. The maid finishes errands for her mistress. She stops abruptly upon seeing familiar faces. Her attention is drawn to a secret meeting. She spots Rosaline and Mariette together in town. The maid hides behind crates to observe them. The two red-haired ladies share a secret whisper. Mariette looks delighted during their hushed conversation. The two nobles appear to be close allies. The maid is shaken by this secret alliance. She rushes back to warn her mistress immediately. The palace hallway stands grand and silent. She arrives to find Rosaline already inside. The maid watches nervously from the shadows. The silver-haired lady in the black dress thanks Rosaline as she prepares to depart. Walking down the hallway, the maid tells her lady to please be careful. The maid urgently approaches Saravi, shouting that she has something important to tell her. Saravi asks the maid Emily what is the matter, as she mentions her errand from earlier. Emily explains that she saw Lady Rosalind and Lady Mariette whispering to each other. Emily notes they were being careful and seemed close, but Saravi says she already knew. Surprised by the response, the maid asks her mistress how she was already aware. Narrative text explains that Mariette added the aphrodisiac at Rosalind's request. Saravi confirms her suspicion that Mariette has feelings for the prince, Raven. She adds that Mariette plans to confess to Raven and meet with him alone. Emily asks if that is really the truth of the situation. Narrative text declares there is no mistake that Mariette is the culprit. Saravi frantically tries to open the locked double doors as a heavy rattle sounds. Emily questions the lady's conviction, suggesting there might be another possibility. Saravi shouts they have no time because Mariette is trying to poison the prince again. Saravi states they must stop the plan before Raven becomes a victim. Emily gazes at her lady with a worried and uncertain expression. A close-up shows a hand grasping at a white piece of clothing. Narrative text explains how she went to the meeting place and misunderstood everything. Raven angrily asks why Saravi is doubting him and demands the truth about her tampering. Saravi defensively shouts that Mariette put poison in his cup and she only switched them. Raven rejects her explanation, stating firmly that Mariette is not that kind of person. Saravi looks on in stunned horror as Raven's shadow looms over the argument. Saravi asks herself if she is the kind of person to do such things. Raven sighs deeply and remarks that they are going through this once again. Tea sets and plates shatter violently against the floor with a loud crash. Emily explains that after those events, her lady returned and said something strange. A vibrant blue sky hangs over the grand white palace domes. Saravi stands dejectedly in the doorway, her head bowed in quiet sadness. Rushing over, Emily asks her lady how the meeting with the prince turned out.
Saravi lets out a long, weary breath as she looks at her maid.
She expresses the deep pain of being thought of as a murderer. Saravi slams her hands down in frustration, lamenting how irritating the situation is.
Emily watches her mistress, thinking that the lady must be deeply hurt. Saravi collapses onto the bench in despair while a soft thud sounds.
Emily asks her mistress to please tell her exactly what happened.
Saravi explains she switched the cups because Mariette put an aphrodisiac in the tea.
Emily looks shocked as she learns the substance was actually poison.
Saravi realizes that Mariette didn't have feelings for Raven, explaining the assassination attempt. She looks down with a somber expression and declares Mariette isn't the culprit. Emily wonders about the motive if poison was used instead of a potion. Saravi sits at the tea table, staring blankly while lost in thought.
A close-up reveals her conviction as she repeats that Mariette is not the culprit.
Saravi and Emily sit together with a small wooden box between them.
A notebook summarizes the mystery, detailing Mariette's death and Saravi's role in the poisoning.
Emily nods in agreement, confirming the notebook represents the full picture. Saravi wonders what exactly happened on that day to lead to this. One maid mentions that the upcoming festival's fireworks will be exceptionally grand.
Another maid asks a weeping girl if she has a date for the festival.
The maids laugh together while Saravi stands in the background looking drained. Saravi walks past the palace staff with a heavy, rhythmic tap sounding.
The maids exchange a confused look as their mistress passes by silently.
Saravi recalls the report that Lady Rosaline and Lady Mariette were seen whispering together. She resolves to find Rosaline and uncover the truth behind their secret conversation.
In the palace courtyard, a carriage stands ready as the staff attend to their duties.
A heavy carriage door is slammed shut with a loud metallic bang. A maid informs the lady that Rosaline departed early that morning. Saravi decides to head straight to the imperial palace to find her.
She stands with a determined expression, focused on her next difficult move. Her mind is set on asking Prince Raven about the events of that fateful day. A carriage races through the lush forest, its wheels clattering with a quick clop sounding.
The majestic white towers of the imperial palace loom under the brilliant sun.
Saravi walks through the grand hallways as the guards remain at their posts.
She reasons that since Raven has no schedule, he should be somewhere in the mansion. Saravi navigates the hallway carefully, scanning the area for any sign of her targets. She quickly presses herself against the wall as a soft swoosh sounds. Peeking through the doorway, she spots Rosaline standing in the middle of an ornate room.
Rosaline stands before Prince Raven, who towers over her in his formal green uniform.
Raven smiles warmly and thanks her for a reminder that had completely slipped his mind.
Rosaline looks up at him with wide green eyes and claims she only wanted to be helpful. Leaning in with a gentle gaze, Raven asks if she would be his partner for the festival. Overwhelmed by the sudden invitation, Rosaline can only gasp out a stunned question. Raven stands tall and offers his hand with a confident, charming smile.
Watching from the shadows, Saravi finds her legs trembling with a frantic quiver sounding. Rosaline clutches her hands to her chest and declares she is deeply honored to accept.
Raven offers a small smile and says he will leave all the festival preparations to her. As Raven walks away, Rosaline watches him go while blushing furiously with delight.
Saravi is left in a state of utter shock, wondering if the two are actually dating.
Rosaline starts to walk out of the room as a distant door shuts with a bang. Rosaline spins around with a quick whirl sounding as she realizes she is not alone. Recovering her composure, Rosaline blushes and asks how long Saravi has been standing there.
Rosaline continues to act bashful, claiming she never imagined His Highness would be so concerned. Saravi ignores the theatrics and states plainly that there is something she wants to ask. Rosaline is confused by the cold demeanor and notes the atmosphere feels dangerous.
Saravi demands to know exactly what Rosaline and Mariette were talking about on that specific day. Stunned by the direct question, Rosaline can only let out a bewildered, quiet gasp.
Saravi watches her intently, her purple eyes narrowing as she waits for a response.
She presses Rosaline to recount the details of her conversation with Mariette in depth.
Rosaline is internally furious, wondering how Saravi can stay so calm about the date proposal. Rosaline asks what she said, prompting Saravi to repeat her demand for the full truth. Rosaline insists she already told everything about Mariette's feelings and the meeting they held.
Saravi asks if there is truly nothing else she doesn't know, even a small detail.
Rosaline looks away with a somber face and claims there is nothing more to tell. Rosaline then questions if this investigation is really what is most important to Saravi. Saravi surprises her by declaring that the upcoming festival date is wonderful news.
Saravi clasps her hands together, realizing she can remove two troublesome obstacles at once. Rosaline is left speechless, staring at her lady with complete and utter confusion.
Saravi leans in with a piercing gaze for one final question about Mariette's true feelings. Rosaline is frozen with dread, wondering just how much Saravi has actually deduced. Saravi stands with an unwavering expression, silently questioning if Rosaline truly knows the truth.
The black-haired man drinks from his bottle.
Saravi calls out to Mr. Delian.
Saravi asks him to explain the details of when the Crown Prince had tea with Mariette. Demian responds with a confused look. Demian notes Mariette claims she had no affection for the prince, prompting Saravi to ask why she felt that way.
Saravi recalls that both she and His Highness shared that same sentiment after tea.
Narrative text explains that while Mariette didn't like the prince, she wasn't the one who poisoned him. The story questions why Saravi and Raven both believed Mariette lacked affection for him.
The mystery deepens as to why Mariette would poison the cup if she wasn't the true culprit.
Frustrated, Saravi clutches her hair and wishes she could just ask the Crown Prince himself.
Raven watches them from above and asks what they are doing.
Saravi looks up in shock as she realizes the prince is right there. Descending the stairs, Raven asks what the two of them were whispering about. Saravi wonders why he is so calm after what Rosalind likely told him about the past. She decides it is better to fade away quietly rather than provoke old, painful memories. Raven asks what happened the day he had tea with Mariette, leaving Saravi stunned. Raven notes that Saravi was present that day, which she tentatively admits.
Demian interjects that Saravi hasn't recovered her memories since the recent explosion accident.
Raven looks down at the pair with a heavy silence. The prince's gaze remains fixed and unreadable. The imperial palace glows under the sun. Narrative text recalls Rosaline asking Raven for a private meeting between him and Mariette. Saravi realizes that Rosalind truly did ask for that specific favor. Raven asks if she finds the story enticing. Narrative text notes his fear that the truth might separate them. Saravi is left speechless by his words. Raven recounts Rosalind's insult about Saravi's weak mentality as she watches him with irritation. He explains that it was simply a method he had never attempted before. Saravi wonders if Rosalind's intent was merely to shank her up. She realizes Rosaline was bullying her under the guise of friendship. Saravi questions why Raven is suddenly being so open with all this information. Raven asks if she has any idea who actually killed Mariette. Saravi realizes the situation is becoming dangerously bad. She never expected such a horrifying question from the prince. Saravi thinks about how vile and terrifying the truth really is. Raven suggests he may have forgotten due to shock and asks Saravi to confirm. Panicked, she tells herself she has touched on a trauma and claims her memories are unclear. The prince lets out a soft press. Raven places his hand over Saravi's eyes and offers to help her remember everything. He tells her that she should expect to feel a little bit of pain. A sudden, loud scream echoes throughout the palace. The scene shifts as Raven asks if someone has something to say. Raven sits with Mariette in the garden. Mariette blushingly confirms that she has something to say. Mariette shouts her love as Raven spits his tea in total shock. Mariette confesses she is in love with someone she finds incredibly beautiful.
The red-haired lady glows with happiness.
Raven looks on with a bewildered expression. Raven asks if she is referring to his relative, Scheherazade. Mariette joyfully confirms that he has guessed correctly. Raven suggests that if she wants to meet the man so badly, she should just go see him herself. In a memory, Mariette gazes admiringly at a distance while surrounded by other ladies at a party. Narrative text explains that her feelings were far deeper than a simple crush. Mariette places her hand over her heart while explaining she has no desire for physical or emotional closeness. Sitting at the tea table, she tells Raven that simply looking at her beloved provides all the strength she needs to live. She declares her overwhelming gratitude for being born into a world where her idol exists. Raven watches her with a blank stare, internally questioning what kind of person she could possibly be.
The two look at one another across the table as the sun shines brightly above them.
A small, soft smile plays on Mariette's lips. Raven asks if his confusion sounds strange to her, and she initially agrees before backpedaling in a panic. He clears his throat and notes that her particular way of loving is not a common sentiment. Mariette insists that she is perfectly happy even if her feelings are never returned by the one she admires. Raven realizes that for her, the pure happiness of the person she loves is the source of her own joy. She blushes deeply and confirms that this is the core of her personal belief. Raven is caught off guard and lets out a sudden, involuntary laugh. He laughs openly while Mariette defensively insists she is telling the absolute truth. Mariette watches him with wide, surprised eyes as he continues to chuckle. Feeling flustered, she quickly drinks from her cup with a series of quick gulps sounding. Raven admits with a smile that he has never received such a sudden and unique confession before. Narrative text notes that he found her to be a remarkably pure and warm-hearted young lady. He smiles gently at her, seemingly touched by her honest and selfless declaration. The prince notices a change in her and asks if something is wrong. The peaceful moment is shattered by a sudden heavy thud, sounding as something goes terribly wrong.
Mariette lies motionless on the floor while voices scream for someone to call a doctor immediately.
In the present, Saravi realizes the person Mariette truly loved was actually Scheherazade. The truth remained hidden because Mariette found her deep admiration too embarrassing to reveal to anyone. A new question arises regarding Rosaline's role in the events of that day. Saravi wonders what specific conversation occurred between Rosaline and Mariette prior to the meeting. She reasons that Mariette would never have used the crown prince as a mere tool to reach Scheherazade. Saravi considers that the opposite scenario would actually make much more sense. Raven, Saravi, and Demian stand together as the truth about Mariette's distant, respectful love is analyzed. The narrative reveals that Mariette was essentially an otaku who treated Scheherazade as her absolute idol. Demian asks for an explanation, prompting Raven to reveal he shared his memories with Saravi. Feeling left out, Demian gestures to himself and asks where he fits into the explanation.
Raven remains silent, staring forward and completely ignoring the other man's question.
Demian is stunned by the dismissal, while Raven admits he still hasn't identified the one who poisoned the tea. Saravi panics internally, worried about her words in front of the man who may still blame her.
She looks up at Raven, who stands over her with a calm and unreadable expression.
Saravi notes that his current demeanor is surprisingly gentle for someone dealing with a suspected criminal. She reflects on her memories of Mariette, convinced the woman was far too honest to ever lie. Raven agrees, stating that Mariette appeared to be the most innocent person involved in the entire tragedy.
Relieved that she isn't in immediate danger, Saravi tentatively asks if Mariette has been cleared of suspicion.
Raven warns that they shouldn't be hasty, as anyone is capable of hiding behind a convincing mask. Confused by the shift in tone, Saravi asks him to clarify what he is trying to imply. As Raven prepares to answer, Saravi desperately prays to herself that she isn't the one he suspects. She takes a breath and asks the prince directly if he truly knows the identity of the culprit.
The three figures stand in silence on the ornate balcony as the sun begins to set.
Saravi looks down with a grim expression, her mind racing to connect the pieces of the mystery. A single glowing puzzle piece floats against a swirling blue background. The grand palace stands bathed in the warm golden light of the late afternoon sky. Saravi confirms Mariette's feelings for Scheherazade, leaving Emily in a state of shock. Saravi prepares to share even more information. The maid's expression becomes deeply serious.
Emily shouts that she had already warned the lady about this several times.
The maid weeps dramatically while Saravi offers a sheepish, silent smile. Emily fumes about the culprit's cruelty as Saravi tries to calm her down.
Emily begins to worry that her blunt outburst was unnecessary.
Saravi asks the maid for assistance changing her clothes.
Saravi and Emily call out to one another in the bedroom.
Saravi is confused when Emily tells her to put on her clothes. The maid's eyes widen in frozen horror.